Welcome. This session is about operationalizing the data mesh and moving from proof of concept, POC, and into production. Many of you are interested in data mesh as a means to create data products at scale, at speed, things that are just more useful and meaningful to be able to help the business make decisions, to be able to innovate and better collaborate. And to do that, we're going to need the business to act as that product owner and the voice of the customer. So the business really needs to care. And so as part of getting started and figuring out the toolings and the processes needed to create products, we really need to use that in a way that brings the business along as the key part of the journey. So in this talk, we're going to be talking about how we use some of these initial marquee data products as a means to show what good looks like, along with many of the data projects that might already be in flight, to get a data team, probably one of the only teams that's super excited about data mesh today, to be able to evangelize and get the business to care. My name is Teresa Tung, and I'm our Chief Technologist within Accenture's Cloud First Data and AI team. And I've been looking at data products for many years now. So I've been at Accenture for 16 years. And like many of you, anybody who has been doing enterprise data, the data mesh concept really struck a bell, right? I think Zhamak Dehghani actually coined data mesh as how agile is applied right into the data space. We got really excited because now it's really about unlocking data at speed and at scale. And it's something that I'm also really excited about. So as I mentioned, getting started really requires getting the right roles that definitely encompass how technology and business work together. It might be bringing together a lot of technology teams across the company. Some organizations have a really strong hub, a really strong centralized team that handles a lot of the data. Other groups might have very strong spokes, right? There's a lot of high data literacy across the company. And so these spokes might be already making different technology choices, different data product choices, and have a lot of capability. But how do we still bring that together so that the data products that the company offers is more meaningful when they're organized and managed together? The processes for doing so, and again, depending on the organization structure, thinking through how heavy those processes need to be. In organizations that might have lower data literacy, you might need to have a stricter, more rigid process in the beginning as people understand what it means to create data products and to work with data technologies. And that leads to the tooling. So many of the tools that are needed for data products and data mesh, you may already have, right? So just as I mentioned, I really look at the analogy of Agile for software engineering now, with data mesh applied to data. And so just like with Agile, you have DevOps and you have tools, you have processes, and you have roles. In the same way with data mesh, we need to figure out how these work together. And what's really needed to get started and get excitement, especially from your non-data geeks, is a killer data product. It's something that anybody in the company can look at and say, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? That's different than how I might access data today. And I want the rest of my data to look like that. So I have the information that I need to drive my business decisions and to really be a competitive differentiator. So some of this picture shows what those parts are, right? So the initial concept car, that killer product that shows what good looks like. Then it's the processes in which we can actually use to go back to our data projects and see, are there candidates for data products? Should these projects be taking an extra step to identify the products that are contained therein and to be able to do some extra work to be able to publish those as products? They might be candidate data products that are really meaningful for the business that might not have a project to date. So we can use this to also figure out what that business case is to be able to bring them on. So we'll have that initial killer product. We'll have the processes in which to evaluate candidates for products and identify new products. And then we have the rigor in which to bring them in and to create products. So how can anybody have a checklist, if you will, to say, if I have a data product, this is what it needs to have to qualify as that data product. And there's a balance between, again, how strict do we want to be? So I'm going to start with the first part, and each section will be breaking up into some exercises that I encourage you to look at with your organization. And again, this has a lot to do with the maturity of the organization and how much we can handle from day one. So let's talk about defining and just getting on the same page of what a data product is. I think that's one of the most important things to start with. And there's a lot of arguments like, is it narrowly defined or broadly defined? And so many of the data products that might come from existing projects today that might be easiest to onboard might be, designed for pointed uses, right? These are some of the pivots that we're actually, maybe moving away from, right? So, but there's a lot of use, right, in the data. Somebody's paying for those systems. It's already up. So let's make those as products, the ones that make sense, and you have a user community that wants to support it. So we might move towards data products that will have a wider definition of users. And today, maybe not all of them look like that. And so the reason why, from an industry leading, I'm not saying it goes all the way to the 5, right, where they all have to be widely used. You're going to have a mix. And I have an illustration at the bottom, right? All of those things, nails and screws, different types of chairs, dining set and furniture sets. Who's to say they're not all products? In fact, they are, because they are of service to an end user. And the data product owner, or in this case, the product owner, is the best set to be able to determine, do I need the different types of chairs? Is there a market just for the nails and the screws on their own? And so that's really left to the domain. But so it will eventually move to the case where you'll have a mix of data products. But to date, in the beginning, maybe some of these initial products will be a bit more pointed in terms of use, because we're taking existing applications and systems, and a fast way to find some of these products is to say, let's define, out of all your data assets and projects, is there a product in there that would be of more meaningful use if we actually supported it like a product that we can then build towards maybe wider use? Question number 2, it could be around, are your data products more consumption-based or more source-based? And again, I'm thinking it's a mix of both, right? So in the future, we're going to have consumption-based, we're going to have source-based, we're going to have aggregate-based. And in the beginning, again, it might be a lot more source-based. The teams that are hosting some of these systems, those might be a great place to start. Again, in the same way, is the data product defined narrowly or broadly, is to say, well, who's paying for the systems? Let's identify the users and to be able to, really pick out what the data products and why they're actually paying for the systems and the value they're in. Can I structure it better so the product is of more use to the user community? So I suggest going through this exercise to see where you are and maybe where you want to move towards. So in this first picture here, we really want to talk about a case study, right? So the data product is packaged to simplify that user's ability to gain meaningful insight. It's to be useful. And so the right level of the product, we want to have the domain be able to make the right size investment and the right size packaging, right? They're going to know how to do this best. And then something that the central team can really help with is a checklist of the product characteristics, right? Like, what does it need to be that uplifts it from a data asset or, raw materials to be a product? And so in this example, we have something for digital health records. And this digital health record data product was made for a medtech company. And there might be a couple different types of products in maturity. We might have a product that is something that exists today, right? Something like an analytical record that is used for efficiency within that line of business. Data scientists within that internal team can be able to access that same analytical record so that they're working off the same set of data. And the types of ways that we can support discoverability, maybe it's easy, right? It's a code repository Like I mentioned, it's an analytical record that I can address and consume. It means that it's self-describing. So maybe the documentation about what's comprised in this analytical record, I can use a lot more domain-specific terms. The fact that it's quality, right? The quality might be best effort. So in terms of support, so quality is certain around the data quality, but also in terms of, do I have someone to go to if it's down? Is it available? Is there someone to call if I have questions? From a security perspective, I might have some simple role-based access control, and I might not even broadcast this product beyond that internal line of business in the beginning, right? Maybe people can discover and see what the product looks like, and it's not really shown to the whole business in a way that you can get access to it, right? I can have a manual process to get access. And from an interoperability, we have harmonized this product together. So it is something that's harmonized with the record within that line of business. The second type of maturity that this product team might choose to do is to create something that is meant for use across the business, across other parts of the business. So if another part of the business was creating a solution for COPD, lung disease, they might want to use the same data from this digital health product. And in which case we need much more support. And so from a checklist, we can require now, right, things that are cross line of business. They need to be within the data and model catalog. That for security's sake or ease of access, we might decide that the domain might decide that it needs this automated workbench, right? Something that will spin up the data so that people can use it and spin it down when they're done to really give control of the access, right? It's not a copy. It is around dictionary definitions and sample code that make it really easy for these people outside the team to be able to apply it for their use case. It is service level objectives, right? In addition to maybe data around lineage and around quality, having these objectives about concurrent users and uptime, possibly even support, right? That I can, if I have a question, it'll be answered within a determined turnaround time. From a security perspective, it might have additional synthetic data needs, right? So maybe not everything is shown to these end users. And from an interoperability, we might want to publish common patient and product keys that connect with other products across this company. And so we see here that the decision to make this additional investment is left to the domain, but the checklist as to what is required and making sure that both the product producer and the consumer is really aware of the risks, right? By maybe working with that initial internal data product, it might not have been meant for use for somebody else. But if they're willing to take the risks and both the producers and the consumers are okay with that risks, maybe that's okay. So maybe I just need that analytical record for a single one-time insight. It gets my job done. If I was going to build on it, right, to build my business and a downstream derived product that's going to drive a business application, maybe now I can use that funding to actually up-level it to this higher supported data product with maybe the right performance, in this case synthetic data or a workbench, and the right modalities of access for people to use. Finally, a last type of data product that requires even more support might be something that is meant for partners to work with. So this would be something like this partner integrated sales marketplace with Salesforce, and that adherence to things like HL7 ontologies and FHIR standards, having an additional interface requires yet more investment there. So the main point here is that the choice as to how mature the data product needs to be, then whether it's a nail, a chair, a dining set, right? That is really up to the domain. They're going to know that best. However, from a central team, what we can really do to help is to, one, make sure they're thinking about the value, like that they're going to measure the KPIs, both from a efficiency use case, better cost, maybe more automation that makes things more automated, it's more secure, but also from a business use case. We're going to get more insights. We're going to be able to collaborate, in this case, with Salesforce to be able to create a new line of business. We're going to enable our different parts of the business, like that team working on lung disease, to create new treatments. right? To be able to measure those insights and to identify that day one. The product canvas, right? This intake form, that is a checklist that helps that business domain think about, again, from their data product, all the parts about how people are going to address the data quality, the policies that they want. This is all needed for them to think through, right? What it means to create a product beyond just having the data asset itself. And then second, it's really useful and meaningful for that data consumer to evaluate the risks and the rewards of using that product. So let's talk about the next stage, right? So if we know what a data product is, the next stage might be thinking about how do we really think about the creation of the product and the roles, right? Some companies, they have a lot of data capability and others might have less. It might be still within that central data team who really knows how to create data assets and manage data architectures. So the first one, when we talk about who owns the data product, right? Many data today is owned by IT, right? The systems, we talk about the zones, it is a IT or data organization managed process. We're trying to move it to more of a business owned asset. And how far we can get here, again, really depends on the literacy. So we might in the beginning still need for some organizations to have that data team still play a lot of the roles, right? So maybe even like the data product owner, in the beginning, we might need to really have that data team drive. This is what it means to be a data product owner. Mr. Business Person, right? Could you help us really understand the use cases and the value from the data? So we're going to really need to train them to really understand the roles that need to be played. And then if ever, are they going to actually even staff the roles to build the products and maintain the systems themselves, right? So maybe they don't. So how do we actually move this? One is who owns the product should be moving towards the business owning it, maybe owning the budget, owning the product roadmap. But even knowing that they need to ask for those things is going to take a bit of training. And then the second question, who leads that data product definition and roadmap? Today, it's largely IT-led. These are often investments that are IT and data-led investments. And as we move to that investment and roadmap being business-led, again, we still might need a lot of data and IT really showing how that's done, especially from a technology feasibility and effort perspective, right? Even managing a backlog, right? If we think about applying those agile principles here, that most business, they're not going to know what that means, right? So to be able to even define very clearly what these roles are so that the business cares. Some companies have very strong spokes already, right? You might have already a lot of capability within those teams. And in this case, you still might have these operations guiding principles to be able to say, well, when there are, areas of being able to have data interoperate or to create a better aggregate product that's of service to many users, how do we actually bring these different domains and different parts of the business together? And so these operation guiding principles might be standing up, review boards and steering committees. And that might still be guided from the central team to really be able to stand up that process, to document the findings, and to really ensure that people are following what they've agreed upon. So, this case study is around how you might be defining some of these processes. And so the roles on the left is going to depend upon the maturity of your organization. In this story here, it is one with a very strong hub team, right? So there is one data organization who really is the one who's managing a very centralized type of data architectures. And much of the business, they certainly knew data is important, but they weren't really involved in the creating of data assets. And so as we move to data products, part of this was figuring out how do we get them involved in a way that they are taking on more of that product ownership, and then to be able to still enable these creation of products with the other data teams. We created 4 processes to get started. So this one is an example of onboarding a data product to the mesh. We have being able to request access to a data product, being able to promote access of the data product, we might actually limit who we might want to promote that access to, right? Or the availability of a new data product so we don't confuse certain users and really push it out to some of those users who would find this more meaningful. You could imagine this like rolling out a new beta product, right? You don't want to send it to everybody all at once. You might start with some targeted groups in which that product is intended. There's the last one is around how do you actually manage a change, right? How do you roll out either additional features or to have a breaking change or deprecation? So those are the 4 processes we start. Here's an example of the onboarding process. So anybody can identify a need for a product. And the first step is to look in your data catalog to see if that product exists or if it's already being built, right? Maybe it's not completely done, but we have that in that catalog that some team is already working on something similar. And so clearly if it exists, we want to promote the use. If it doesn't, this is a good chance to see, like, should another team who might already have something similar actually add this as an additive feature to their product, or do we actually require a brand new product, and who's the best team to actually do that, right? So this gives us a chance to be able to harmonize efforts if they need to be, and in many cases they might not. And so if they don't, we could still have this as a means to be able to help those teams run through the checklist, right? Do they understand what it means to be a data product? And even if it's that you're not going to have any support and it's best effort because that's what's needful, just again, making sure that's really clear so that others can actually make the decisions whether to use this or not, or whether we want to broadcast this or not. So as that readiness assessment comes in, we can check, do they have enough of this information that we're ready for the mesh? And if so, we're going to actually be able to bring it in. And bringing it in is going to be not necessarily a physical copy of the data, right? It's bringing it logically so that people can find it within our catalogs, that we have the right metadata to be able to manage and govern it, and then to be able to produce it. So many companies, as we're getting started with data products, right, we can run this process in at least 3 different types of programs that you might already have ongoing. One is existing data products. So you might have projects where you are doing a cloud or data migration. You might be modernizing systems. And so one way to work here is that we can maybe just try to see and find the data products therein. And this is one place where I do like to add a virtualization layer right at the top of this migration or modernization, because you can actually start seeing and shaping your data products through the journey. And then when the migration is done, you now also have this muscle that continues to allow you to create and experiment with new data products as it goes on. The second might be around a pivot of a data organization to that cloud continuum. So when you're setting up governance strategies, maybe setting up data catalog rollouts, this is a good place to add, right, this product mentality. So it's not just governance of data, it's governance of data products. It's not just a catalog of data, it's a catalog of data products where you're really thinking about the end user and that role of the business domain in that process. The third way you might get started is around creating a differentiated data product. So things like Customer 360, things like Digital Twin, by definition, it's going to work across many different domains and parts of the business. Use this to really figure out how we get these different parts of the business to come together in a way that both gives them control of the data that they have while creating this very differentiated data product that everybody has agreed is needful, right? So these are good ways that apply some of that onboarding methodology and that product shaping into something that you might have ongoing already. So the last part is really around, the evolution, right? So how do we evolve the products? And so one of the questions I get asked a lot is how much standardization is needed across products? I think, the problem was that maybe sometimes we try to master all the data, and that's part of why we need data mesh, right? Is because we while I would love that to happen, it's kind of, it's not something that keeps pace with what business needs. And so today we might actually start with either data products that are highly governed or things that are managed as products as highly governed. And we might want to move towards things that are just more decentralized, where from a centralization perspective, there's certain things we must have, right? We must have security, things like privacy and risk taken care of. But a lot of the decisions about how much standardization that's needed, how much adherence to industry ontologies, or how much adherence across connectivity of products within the company, those really need to be made by the domains. Part of it because they will have the funding to know what is needful. Of course, better connected data products, that might be a means to have a better product, right? Things that connect well with other products and within the industry, that's going to become a more competitive product. So maybe let's use incentives as a means to actually create that standardization rather than requiring it to be fully standardized before it's able to be useful to somebody. The second question might be, well, what metadata is needed to evaluate and manage products? And this is really important. Without this metadata, it's going to be very quickly hard to find the data products that are most meaningful for the end user, right? If I search for customer in data catalogs today, you might get pages and pages of results. And so having, definitely need your technical and operational metadata, but we're going to need to invest a lot more in adding some of this business metadata. And you'll hear me talk about domain knowledge graphs, the same technology that manages search on the internet to be able to manage our data products here, right? So analogy I use here a lot is, where we are in data products might be like when we started with AOL. And so when we started with AOL, we had, curated services for sports and weather and the such. And now when we search on things for the internet, right, you just search for Accenture and you get the location closest to you, our CEO, our stock price. And so it's all kind of packaged already based off of the context of the search. And so while we might start with something kind of like AOL today with data products, let's publish things that show what good looks like. But, we really need the metadata so we could get to this place where it's like internet search today that really evolves with the context of the user and what's needful. So, this is something that we've done ourselves. So we have a data platform, and as part of that, we've indexed a lot of the metadata that's needed as part of producing, right? So when we're producing these data products, some of these business definitions and rules and quality things around our technical and operational lineage metadata, really identifying, these are some of the things that we need to create data products so that users can evaluate its use. There's standards that the Essential team also requires, some minimum standards to make sure that we can properly support these products. And then finally, there's the metadata about the end users. What are people actually looking for? And this is what's going to be able to create the business case that allows us to continue to create and improve data products. So, how things might start could be, you could start with the existing systems and projects that you have today, right? So find the MVP of metadata that's needed, or the MVP needed to actually make a product something that is meaningful, that an end user can discover and understand this is useful for me. And so as we look and scan through a lot of these products, we might actually identify, there's some products that exist where we know who the users are, and we're going to do some extra work to really publish it as a product and support it as a product. So as we evolve, right, we're going to be able to see what people are actually using. And here's where the Central team can really play a big role, using a lot of the metadata, using some of the, maybe it's not metadata power today, maybe it's just a manual, what people are looking for, and being able to connect different user communities who might find the product meaningful with the different producers who might have something to offer. And so as we're doing that, to be able to then say, well, are there additional improvements that should be made? What are these searches that people are looking for? Are there products, because I could see what people have published in the initial phase, that we might want to organize teams to see, could we actually either rationalize, could we actually create a better aggregate product? So, this is how we would see it evolve, right? You could actually use the initial products first. So you might initially start with 2 products of operations in China and the US. we might see there's actually a need for an operations global. It'll be useful for many teams. And maybe you don't need to deprecate the China and the US specific versions. Maybe they're still useful for a subset of users, that operations global is something that is more core that most of the business will be interested in. So hopefully in this session we talked about, what we really need to get the business involved and get them excited, right? So one is using that killer product to show what good looks like. And then using that as a means to build the muscle, right? So what are the right roles? And the roles are going to incorporate the right level of participation based off of your organization's maturity into the processes. We're going to map those processes into the tools, and using this as a means that we can go back and scan and see the, list of data mesh ready projects that we can actually up level into products, and to have that checklist to be able to bring in the intake. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Teresa Tung, and please connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any other questions. Thank you so much.